Hello, and welcome to the fifth module of HSM 375. For this course, we'll be discussing data integrity. There are three learning objectives. The first is we are going to define key terms that are related to data integrity. Secondly, going to differentiate good practices, bad practices, and falsification. And then lastly, going to describe what ALCOA plus principles are. So we begin with definition of terms. Just a quick recap. In Module 4, we talked about data life cycle and we also talked about data quality. So as this relates to data integrity, let's take it that the data quality for create at the point of data creation is X, while data quality at the time the data is destroyed is Y. Now, let's also take it that the data quality that we are, interested in this example is uniqueness. So when we think about data integrity, what we are saying is that X needs to be equal to Y. So that is what it is that we are interested in. For X to be equal to Y, it means that, X stays consistent between all the cycles till the point that it gets to, destruction. So that is what we mean by X being equal to Y. And that's what we want as, it relates to data integrity. So, a definition for data integrity is that is the degree to which data is complete, is consistent, is accurate, is trustworthy, and reliable. Most importantly, that these characteristics are maintained throughout the data life cycle. Um, and this definition is according to the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, which is an agency that regulates the UK body. But some of the things that happens there kind of applies to the US, so it's kind of cross acting in terms of picking the things that are important. So, what is the objective of data integrity? As it has to do with healthcare, we want to ensure the patient safety and make sure that the services and products are of high quality, and this is to protect the patients. And we do this by managing patients' risk, and we do that by making sure that quality is of high importance when it comes to healthcare services and healthcare products. And another thing that data integrity hopes to achieve is to assure the quality of service and product, the safety and efficacy of drugs. And one of the ways it tries to do this is to make sure that documented records are available just in case there's a need to review or audit those things. So, one of the key elements of data integrity, which kind of differs in the way of all the other things that we have covered in this course, is how much data integrity goes hand in hand with regulations. And an example of just how important data integrity is according to 21 CFR Part 11. This is a code of federal regulation that is focused on electronic records and electronic signature. So this is a federal regulation, so it's really something that is compliance is very, very important. And this is one thing that's of all the things we've discussed in this module so far, that has a lot to do with federal regulations. All the other ones we've kind of discussed, we haven't done that, with attachment to federal laws and stuff like that. So this is to explain just how important data integrity is. So I just want to highlight a number of things that is said in this regulation. The subsection one of the subsections looks at the initials and signature of the people person who performs each test and the date the tests are performed needs to be included in the documentation. This also means if two people performed a test, both people's date for performing and their initials or signature has to be, part of the documentation. And another part, subsection of the regulation says that all data generated during the conduct of non-clinical laboratory studies, except those that were generated by automated data collection systems, must be recorded directly, promptly, and legibly in ink. So this is a very important part of it. The fact that it has to be recorded in ink is kind of to a way to make sure that the information kind of is preserved. So, when you are reading about data integrity, there are a couple of terms you're going to come across, and I just want to kind of give you the definitions of them just in case you come across them. We have certified true copy or true copy, and then we have data governance. So, these definitions are quite very self explanatory, but if you kind of need further clarifications on that, do tell me so I could give I can kind of expand on it a little bit more. And then data life cycle. We've kind of talked about this in module 4, but this is the definition of data life cycle. And then raw data. I've talked about raw data in a couple of instances. This is the definition of raw data. So good practice, bad practice, falsification. So, when it comes to data integrity, one of the ways to ensure that your data, maintains its integrity is by preventing situations whereby data gets compromised. And the ways to do that is number one, be honest. Make sure that honesty is required of all the staff that are going to be involved in throughout the life cycle of data. You also want to make sure that data is entered or recorded with the date and time per the procedure of the good documentation practice and data integrity guidelines. So this guidelines is quite very extensive. Not expecting you guys to look at it or to read it, but if you're kind of interested in understanding data integrity further, you can go through it. But otherwise, just know that there is a guideline that exists that everybody who is involved in the data life cycle needs to be aware of and needs to comply by. And then another thing to do in preventing compromised data integrity is to make sure that you're entering the data as putting in the initials or signature on the original copy per also the guidelines. And then you want to make sure that data is as accurate as possible. When I say as accurate as possible, I'm acknowledging that there's some things like human error, but just because human error is a possibility doesn't mean we should leave things to chance. So one of the ways that an organization tries to minimize human error as much as possible is to institute systems that is going to, reduce it or minimize it. An example would be encrypting data or data entry so that not anybody gets to be able to enter data. Is only going to be very few people that can enter data, or a situation whereby it requires a kind of two-factor authentication to be able to make any changes to the data, whether it is in cleaning or any other one, so that this way you're kind of minimizing it. And also regularly kind of reviewing your data, auditing it to make sure that everything is the way that it needs to be. So those are some of the ways you could do to minimize human error. Ways to prevent compromising your data Integrity is do not go back and predate your data or backdate your data. That is a big thing you shouldn't do. So never do that. Another thing is to make sure that you have superiors or line managers or supervisors who are kept informed in case of a deviation. An example of a deviation could be a situation whereby you are backing up data, your storage data. Now, if there are a system of backing up or naming these data that is backed up, in a situation whereby you have multiple versions of this backup. Let's use, for example, if there's any change to one version, you back it up, and then let me say by your backup 1 to backup 10 are not exactly the same thing because you've made some multiple edits on that, or you maybe you've cleaned up some data and stuff like that. You've removed duplicates and all kind of things, so that it gets to the point whereby if one staff is using version 10 while another staff is using version 7, they don't have the same data. They have one has incomplete data and one has the full data. So these are places whereby there's potential of deviation because you have multiple versions of this data that can create all of these errors. So you want to make sure that you kind of have something like an overall boss of a sort who is able to kind of make sure that every versions of the backup is up to date and everybody has the right type of the right version of it that needs to be done. So these are all the things that can happen in terms of keeping kind of minimizing deviation, or should deviation happens, there is somebody who is able to track it and correct that. So what are the ways in which data integrity can get compromised? Have discarding source documents after accurate transcription. An example of transcription in this case might be, let's say you conduct an interview in which you used a recorder, maybe an audio recorder, and then when you're done conducting the interview, then you transcribe it into a written form, into a transcript. Now, after you've done the transcribing and everything is all done, 99.9% accurate, then something happens and you discard the recorder. That is an example of discarding your source document. So this is something that, should a situation like this happen, you are compromising the integrity of your data. You could also do deleting e-files after printing. This could be intentionally done or this could be unintentionally done. Another way to compromise data integrity would be not paying attention to details, or having a system in which there's very little or no supervision of the data life cycle. Could also things like data manipulation, data falsification, misrepresentation, and withholding critical information. So these ones I'm going to talk about in greater detail later. So when we then kind of talk about data integrity, does it mean that they all have, they carry the same weight? Is deleting e-files after printing of the same consequence, of the same level of compromise as withholding critical information as you can expect? No, they do not have the same weight. For example, data manipulation, falsification, misrepresentation, and withholding critical information are a big no-no. These are very big actions that can seriously, severely compromise the integrity of your data. Just a quick one. Data manipulation has a different definition. which you may come across when you're reading about data integrity. This definition says that data manipulation is a process that helps you organize your current data so that you don't interpret it, so that you can interpret it. Now, I'm not going to explain this definition. The reason I'm not doing that is because this is not the way we are using data manipulation in the context of this module. So just in case if you come across it, just understand that this is not the context in which we're using it for this class. So that said, of all the different ways that data gets compromised, we can categorize them into kind of three buckets. We have the poor practice, we have the bad practice, and then we have falsification. As you can imagine, poor practice is the least compromising of data integrity, while falsification is the most compromising of data integrity. For Poor practice is kind of unintentional, and is you're not complying by the good governance documentation stuff guideline is not intentional. You're not intentionally refusing to comply by the guideline. An example would be not paying attention to details to the guidelines, or just kind of making a mistake as a result of not paying attention to the guideline. It could be not having a staff that is not adequately trained on the guidelines, or not adequately supervised. So those are kind of poor practices. Now, bad practice, the action may or may not be intentional, but just like poor practice, non-compliance to the guideline is unintentional. An example of a bad practice would be an organization that does not have internal process, that's been set up to validate data, or to review the data, or to make sure that there is minimal alteration that can be done in the data. For instance, not encrypting the data, for an example, or having a situation whereby anybody, can get into the data storage and all that of that. That is an example of a bad practice. While another example would be data security being lax or susceptible to malware. Now, data security can be quite expensive. Some of the times you may have some kind of sophisticated technology stuff that everybody cannot afford, and or you have a situation whereby you're not able to afford a highly skilled data analyst or security systems. That then leaves your data to be susceptible to malware, or even a situation of cyber threats. So those are kind of bad practices. They are not, non-compliance to the guideline is unintentional. Now, falsification, on the other hand, is the action is very much intentional. The non-compliance to the guidelines is very much intentional. An example would be data manipulation. All of those things we talked about: falsification, misrepresentation, and withholding critical information. Now, in this case, what we mean by all of this big four, is either the data analyst or the organization as a whole is intentionally attempting to paint a different picture from reality. Now, let us assume that after data has been entered and cleaned, now a data analysis is run, and at the end of the analysis, the result from the analysis shows that this, whatever finding is unfavorable. Let's use, for example, maybe a new drug was found, to have adverse effects, for example, and it's going to be like a big adverse event. And then instead of choosing to report that there's a problem with this product, the organization decides to delete some data entry, some data items, so that by the time the analysis is run again, it comes out that it is a favorable result. So those are kind of examples of falsifications that are big issues. In situations whereby things like this is done and the FDA finds out, the organizations are usually, cited or issued a letter of warning to let them know that you've done something wrong and we are aware of it and you need to fix that. So let's now talk about ALCOA. So, some of the elements of data integrity is that, and this is according to this very big person, and it says that data supporting the quality and safety of product must meet the ALCOA plus elements in order to avoid regulatory citation. And by regulatory citation, I mean in a situation whereby warning letter is sent for violation of data integrity. There are a couple of examples in which the FDA have issued this warning letter. We have these two companies. The links to there to this warning letters are included in the citation, just in case you want to know a bit more about what happened in the situation. So if an organizations want to, kind of avoid a situation where they're running foul of the regulatory body, you want to make sure that you are keeping up with the data integrity elements. So what are those data integrity elements? So this is the ALCOA plus. So in 1990, we had the FDA Office of Enforcement coined, this term, whereby we have A standing for attributable. Sorry, L for legible, C for contemporaneous. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that's what I mean. And then we have O for original and A for accurate. So this is the elements, the five elements that was coined as at 1990. This is not to say that these elements were not, being effective before then, but this is the first time whereby, kind of defined it in this term and kind of made it such that everybody was not kind of required to do that. However, in 2018, the World Health Organization and the Pharmaceutical Inspection Convention and Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperative Operation Scheme, very long one, they expanded on these elements by including the complete, consistent, enduring, and available. So these are the four pluses that were included with the original ALCOA. And one of the justifications that we're given for those inclusion is that all of this together, the five before and the four, they all ensure that events are properly documented and data is used to support informed decisions. So it's kind of, to make sure that everything is up to par, we paying attention to this nine. So, what are those? So, these are the definitions and explanations to what these are. You can pause at this point to read them. The explanations are they're quite self-explanatory and quite very detailed. But of course, if you don't understand that, you could ask me questions on that. The assigned viewing does cover explanations for what these are, so you can watch the videos, and if you still don't understand it, you can ask questions on that. And another example would be, this is from the Australian government Department of Health, but it kind of focuses on the the first five elements. So, but this does quite a good job of, defining and explaining what those are. So that's where we end in today's class. Do remember to ask questions if you have any, and to seek clarification if there's any part of this lecture or the assessment that is you need further explanation for. Do have a lovely day. Bye.